Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, April 29th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korea reported 680 new cases of COVID-19 on Thursday, inching slightly down from the past 2 days. And as vaccinations continue, authorities have decided to exempt those who've been fully vaccinated in the country from the 2-week quarantine period upon arrival from abroad. Business sentiment among South Korean companies has hit an almost 10-year high. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the related index for all industries in April was 88, the highest since June 2011. And President Joe Biden is to deliver his first speech to Congress in the next couple of minutes. He's expected to discuss details of the American Families Plan, a $1.8 trillion investment proposal for education, paid leave, and other core aspects of the household architecture. We begin with the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea. The nation reported 680 new COVID-19 cases Thursday, slightly down on previous days. Of those cases, 650 were local and 30 were from overseas. 4 more people have died of the virus, raising the death toll to 1,825. Now, meanwhile, as for the vaccination program, a total of more than 2.8 million people took their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine as of today, nearing the government's initial goal of 3 million set until the end of April. South Korea is not going to require people who've been fully vaccinated to stay in self-quarantine for 2 weeks when they enter the country. But so far, that's only for people who got their vaccines here. The government is also working to speed up the development of South Korea's very own vaccines. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
In South Korea, a 2-week self-quarantine period is mandatory for anyone who's come in close contact with confirmed patients or who has recently flown into the country from overseas. But those who've been fully vaccinated in the country will be exempt from this rule starting May 5th.
Those who are fully vaccinated will be exempt from self-quarantine should they come into contact with confirmed patients but test negative. Also, those vaccinated won't have to self-quarantine after visiting other countries if they test negative and have no symptoms.
However, they will still have to report their health conditions to authorities every day and get tested twice during the 2-week period. And the measure applies only from 2 weeks after vaccination, as this is when people have fully established antibodies. And 2 weeks of quarantine are still required for those who visited countries with high risk from variants like South Africa, Brazil, and India, and those who have vaccines not approved by South Korean authorities like Russia's Sputnik V. In another vaccination effort, South Korea is aiming to speed up the development of its own local vaccines. The government is currently conducting clinical trials of 5 local vaccine candidates, 2 of which are set to head into phase 3 in the next half of the year.
The government has injected $62 million to be comprehensively used for preclinical trials, clinical trials, and the production process to make sure vaccines can be released as early as the year end or early next year at the latest.
If it goes as planned, South Korea will be able to produce its own vaccines as well as making vaccines developed by foreign drug makers on consignment. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Social distancing made in-person classes and activities difficult for universities. Now, to stop the spread of the virus and eventually bring more students back on campus, one college in Seoul has installed a rapid COVID-19 testing center that produced results in less than 2 hours. Our Choi Won-jo takes us there.
Schools in South Korea have been juggling a mix of in-person classes and remote learning for more than a year now. And Seoul National University is no exception.
I heard it has been difficult to continue with our classes. Many people said that they couldn't do any class activities, such as experiments, which require face-to-face learning.
As the pandemic has lasted longer than a year, the tendency to avoid in-person classes became very strong. As a result, it has been difficult to operate the school normally.
To make the campus safer and expand in-person learning, This university has installed a rapid COVID-19 testing center in an empty parking lot. But unlike other testing sites, which can take longer than 6 hours to produce results, these sites give results much more quickly.
Right now it's 10:47 a.m. on my phone. I'm going to take a test to see how long it actually takes to get my result. Thankfully, my test came back negative and it only took less than 2 hours. And more importantly, has more than 95% efficacy.
Instead of spending time sending the collected samples to different facilities for analysis, this place has its own analysis rooms that can examine samples right away. And this approach could be adopted at other schools too.
We didn't just install it for our school. We wanted to set a good example, showing that when this facility is installed, the school can go back to somewhat normal. I believe this can definitely be an example for elementary, middle, and high schools and other universities.
More than 200 people a day are getting preliminary COVID-19 tests at the center. And should the approach work, South Korea's Education Ministry will consider implementing this rapid testing system at other schools nationwide. 최은종, Arirang News.
The United States is planning to send more than $100 million of COVID-19 aid to India. The White House said on Wednesday that this includes more than 20 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The U.S. will also be sending oxygen cylinders, rapid diagnostic tests, and millions of masks. These supplies are set to arrive over the next week, starting this Thursday. The aid comes as India continues to grapple with the devastating second wave of the pandemic, with a record 360,000 new cases confirmed in the past 24 hours. Netherlands has become the latest European country to relax COVID-19 lockdown measures. Bars and cafes can now reopen their outdoor terraces for the first time in 6 months. Elsewhere, Israel says all virus restrictions could be lifted in 3 weeks. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Netherlands on Wednesday began relaxing its lockdown measures, despite infection rates and intensive care occupancy remaining relatively high. The country is the latest in Europe to start easing restrictions following Italy, Greece, and France, as they look to slowly edge away from lockdowns over the coming weeks. Under the new rules, bars and cafes are allowed to reopen their outdoor terraces for the first time in half a year. However, some restrictions remain. Terraces are only allowed to open between midday and 6 p.m. for a maximum of 2 socially distanced people per table, unless they're from the same household. The country's Deputy Health Minister Yoav Kish forecast Wednesday that Israel will lift nearly all its COVID-19 restrictions in 3 weeks from now. Starting next week, Israelis holding a so-called Green Pass, showing they have been fully vaccinated or have recovered from COVID-19, will be free of any restrictions. According to Kish, if the number of cases continues to drop, the country will then lift all measures. Earlier this week, the Israeli government allowed children and those who cannot be vaccinated to attend cultural events, dine at restaurants, and enter gyms if they tested negative. Last week, the country's mass vaccination drive helped Israel lift its mask mandate in public places. In Asia, North Korea appears to have resumed in-person classes after the regime shifted classes online last year due to virus concerns. According to the North state-run newspaper, the Nodong Shimun, and the Korean Central TV broadcasting station, offline classes reopened in 87 schools in Pyeongbuk-do province. The North is likely to have reopened offline classes in other regions as well. While the regime has long claimed to be COVID-19 free, it has taken tough measures, such as imposing strict border controls since early last year. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Business sentiment among South Korean companies has hit an almost 10-year high. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the related index for all industries in April was 88, the highest since June 2011. Despite that, the figure remains under 100, indicating that pessimists still outnumber optimists. By sector, BSI among manufacturers jumped 7 points to 96 thanks to higher chip prices. Conglomerates and exporters showed outstanding confidence, both exceeding 100. Sentiment among non-manufacturing businesses rose thanks to the strengthening construction and retail industries. South Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics posted its best ever first quarter sales figures. In its earnings announcement on Thursday, the company said it logged first quarter sales of around $59 billion, up more than 18% on year. The company also hauled in roughly $8.4 billion in operating profit for January to March this year. That's a 45.5% jump from the same period a year before. Industry watchers say Samsung Electronics' strong earnings were largely thanks to strong global sales of TVs, home appliances, and smartphones. They say consumers spent what they had held back in previous quarters. The Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged and vowed to achieve its goals of maximum employment and inflation of about 2% over the longer term. Our Kim Hyo-san with the details.
The U.S. Federal Reserve decided Wednesday to hold its key interest rate unchanged at a range of 0 to 0.25%, while acknowledging recent progress in terms of growth and employment. It adds the rate will be maintained until its goals of maximum employment and 2% inflation are reached over the longer term.
With regard to interest rates, we continue to expect it will be appropriate to maintain the current 0 to 0.25% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessment of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time.
The Fed's policy-setting arm has held rates near zero since March last year, when the U.S. economy began to be severely impacted by the pandemic and related restrictions. The Federal Reserve chief also explained that the Fed plans to stick to its monthly asset purchases.
We will continue to increase our holdings of Treasury securities by at least $80 billion per month and of agency mortgage-backed securities by at least $40 billion per month until substantial further progress has been made toward our maximum employment and price stability goals.
Although the Fed has noted there has been progress on employment, Powell noted that the U.S. is still a long way from full employment. Overall, however, he did hint that the pandemic's threat to the economy has diminished. He said risks remain, as opposed to a statement last month that COVID-19 posed, quote, considerable risks to the economic outlook. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Just a couple of minutes ago, U.S. President Joe Biden started addressing a joint session of Congress for the first time. There, he's set to announce key components of his next legislative plan, including the blueprint for the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. For more, we have our Chang Tae-hyun on the line for us. Tae-hyun, what's the speech all about?
Mo-kyun, President Joe Biden just started addressing a joint session of Congress for the first time. He'll give details of the American Families Plan, a $1.8 trillion investment proposal for education, paid leave, and other core aspects of the household architecture. The plan features 2 years of free pre-kindergarten education as well as free community college for young adults. They'll be paid for using higher taxes from the country's richest people. In addition to that, Biden's proposal includes $225 billion in child care assistance for U.S. families and monthly aid of at least $250 for parents. This is the second part of a two-part proposal designed to revive the country's economy amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And Biden is also expected to talk about what the administration has done during the first 100 days in office. In the meantime, due to coronavirus restrictions, there will be a limited number of lawmakers attending the event, and Vice President Kamala Harris and the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will be sitting behind the president, the first time for two women to occupy the seats behind the president at a joint address to Congress. I'll be back with more details. Back to you, Mo-kyun.
Thank you, Tae-hyun. We appreciate it. Now, the top U.S. military official says the combined forces of South Korea and the U.S. are ready and capable to defend against any threats posed by North Korea. In a pre-recorded speech delivered at an annual forum on Wednesday, General Mark Milley also said the allies closely monitor their joint readiness. He stressed their combined defense readiness by referring to the slogan of the combined forces, "Fight Tonight." Milley also noted that denuclearizing the Korean peninsula requires matters of policy. The South Korean government has unveiled this year's plan to reinvigorate inter-Korean ties. It says that among its top priorities is to give fresh momentum to the stalled talks with Pyongyang. Our Yoon Jang-min reports.
The South Korean government has announced that it aims to revive the stalled talks between Pyongyang and Washington and inter-Korean talks this year. The government on Wednesday released its comprehensive plan for developing inter-Korean relations in 2021. In that document, it said it will seek to establish a coordinated strategy with the Biden administration when it comes to North Korea, while continuing efforts to bring Pyongyang to the table to achieve complete denuclearization. It said it will continue seeking ways for the North to respond to such calls, adding that in the pandemic, non-contact dialogue is also an option. There have been no bilateral or trilateral talks between Pyongyang and Seoul and Washington since the Hanoi summit fell apart in 2019. South Korea aims to restore the inter-Korean communication lines that the North has severed while seeking to establish missions in Seoul and Pyongyang. Seoul also plans to work in stages to establish a consultation body to resume communication since the two sides' joint liaison office was blown up by the North last year. While seeking cooperation in the fight against the pandemic, Seoul plans to hold cultural events together with Pyongyang and work with the North to co-host the 2032 Summer Olympics. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
The family of Samsung's late chairman Lee Gun-hee have revealed how they'll pay taxes on the tens of billions of dollars they inherited from Lee, who was the richest man in South Korea. They say they'll pay in installments and make large charitable donations to lessen the tax burden. Our Peunji has more.
The heirs of the Samsung Group will have to pay nearly $11 billion in inheritance taxes, by far the highest amount ever imposed on a South Korean company. The late Samsung chairman Lee Gun-hee, who was the country's richest man, left behind assets estimated to be worth nearly $27 billion when he passed away in October last year. The assets include stocks worth about $17 billion, as well as a sizable chunk of property holdings, his art collection, as well as cash. Samsung will also make a charitable donation of $900 million over a 10-year period to build a medical center for infectious diseases and to treat children with cancer and rare illnesses. The family will also donate a large collection of artwork, consisting of 23,000 pieces to state-run museums. If the heirs were to inherit the artwork instead of donating, then taxes would need to be paid. The collection even includes 60 pieces that the South Korean government designated as treasures and even national treasures. The culture minister said this is the largest collection ever donated to the country.
The National Museum of Korea will open the collection to the public in June and will also showcase a separate collection in October next year, consisting of the late chairman's most valuable pieces.
As for the taxes, Samsung announced Wednesday that the Lee family has chosen to pay in installments. Under the current tax law, they will pay 1/6 of the tax, which is nearly $2 billion by Friday, April 30th. And will pay the rest over the next 5 years at an interest rate of 1.2% per year. The group did not provide specific details on how the family will split the fortune. But industry sources speculate that considering the succession of the Samsung Group, most of the shares will be inherited by the current Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong, the late chairman's son. Peunji, Arirang News.
Good morning. Depending on where you are in Korea, the weather conditions will differ quite sharply today. While central regions and Gyeongsang-Pukto province have been seeing rain in the morning, but it will take a break during the day, while eastern regions will see showers from this afternoon. Then it will start to rain again from the west tonight, gradually spreading nationwide by Friday. West regions are seeing on and off showers, while the east will see rain along with thunder and lightning, even hail, with 5 to 40 millimeters of rainfall expected there. But yellow dust still lingers across many southern parts of the country. Rain in the south will be mixed with yellow dust, while Gwangju is under a fine dust advisory. When the rain stops, we could be seeing some sunshine, while daily highs will reach similar levels to yesterday. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Jeju will have lots of sunshine today. Temperatures look to remain below season norms though through the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with more at noon Korean time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.